So we're going through this series looking at the book of Colossians, this letter to this first century church. And I love this analogy. I was listening to something this week, and this chap was saying, this was the church when it was in its garage phase. You know, like when these startups like Amazon or Microsoft or Apple, and there was a time in their life when they were like in a garage somewhere, you know, and there was just like a few guys in a garage, and like right at the sort of genesis of these things, which then go on to become these huge organizations. But at that time, that's when the DNA is being formed, the idea, it's all new and fresh. And that's when influences can come in and people can come along and say, do you know what, you're doing this wrong. That's not how it's done. That's not how you sell books. That's not how you make a computer. And it's at those moments where it's so easy for this new thing to go off in the wrong direction. And that's exactly why Paul is writing to the Colossians. And my title for today, as we get into the beginning of chapter 3, now we're all the way into chapter 3, folks. Wow, it's only taken us a year. But today's talk is called WWJT. Now, you've all heard of WWJD, haven't you? I stole this it was on one of the reflections from the Bible app this week, so I've shamelessly stolen it. I just loved it. You know, WWJD is what would Jesus do? And people used to have it on, perhaps they still do, on bracelets or on T-shirts or on bumper stickers. What would Jesus do? It's a good question. It could be useful, I guess, to reflect upon that. So what do you think WWJT stands for? What would Jesus teach? Think. Any others? Who said think? You're right. And you get 10 points. And what do points make? No, nothing at all. Tough luck. So it's what would Jesus think? And that's really the message for today, is about encouraging us to, when we're in those moments where we might be saying, oh, what would Jesus do in the circumstances? But this is taking it to another step, perhaps another level for some of us, I guess. But that reflection of, when we're in situations, when we're confronted with life in all of its joy and all of its frustration and its suffering and its pain and its goodness and its beauty and its ugliness and everyday situations, everyday life, to be asking ourselves, maybe taking that moment, just say, okay, hang on a second. I know what's rattling around my head now, but what would Jesus think? And I think that's what Paul is sort of going for in this sequence. We've been using this book, or I've been recommending that we get a new PowerPoint system for some time. Where's our treasurer? I've been recommending this book. If you're looking just to go a little bit deeper, still very accessible, good for your daily devotionals, that sort of thing. Tom Wright's book, it covers this letter and 3 others in the New Testament. But we're picking it up in chapter 3. You can follow along or read it on the screen from the beginning of chapter 3 in the book of Colossians, which is about halfway through your New Testament. So, if you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on the things that are above, not on the things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, whatever is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and greed, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming on those who are disobedient. These are the ways you also once followed when you were living that life. But now you must get rid of all such things: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and abusive or filthy language, depending on your translation, from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have stripped off the old self with its practices and have clothed yourself with the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge according to the image of its creator. In that renewal, there is no longer Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, enslaved and free, but Christ is all and in all. So the context, if you remember last week, is Paul has now got into this situation where he's getting into the meat of the thing that he's really concerned about with the Colossians, that these Folks have come amongst them, false teachers they're called, and they've come amongst them. And the two main points last time, where there were two main areas that these false teachers were going into, much like people who might have gone into those garages at the beginning of Apple or Microsoft and Amazon and said, oh, no, you're doing it wrong. And in this context, they were coming on in and they were saying things like, no, you need to have all the rituals, you need to have all the practices, you need to have all the feasts and the regulations and the rules. And this is mainly stuff that they were importing from Judaism, but it could be any kind of religious context or any kind of religious rules and rituals. And they were saying, no, that's what you need. You need Jesus plus something else, is the way I was putting it last week. Not just Jesus alone, but Jesus plus all the rules and rituals and morality and following all the rules and all that. Or there was another set of teaching which Paul touched on last time as well, which is about you need to have all these amazing spiritual experiences, ecstatic, super spiritual experiences. Again, Jesus isn't enough. You need Jesus plus the amazing, whoa, experience. And the point last time was that these are not, as much as they look really great, they might seem really pious or holy or serious-minded or exciting and amazing spiritual kind of highs and wow, look at that person, look what they're doing. But it's all rooted in human thinking. It might seem very heavenly, but it's actually very worldly to be caught up in that kind of anxiety and comparison and measuring yourself against other people and being worried about who's best and who's a spiritual black belt and who's just a spiritual beginner. It's actually really worldly. It's not heavenly. It's not the concern of heaven at all. And he set up this paradigm shift that we've had in today's passage where he calls the one thing above. There's a mindset, there's a paradigm which you might call above, or he might call it heavenly, contrasted with a mindset that is below. It's the things of this earth, it's worldly. And Paul is encouraging his listeners, his readers, to be really conscious about which realm you are in. And he uses these metaphors to illustrate the transition between these two mindsets, these two paradigms, these two realms. He uses the metaphor of dying and rising to life. It's like that stuff is dead. He says that's your old life. That's gone. And now you're living a new life. Or he uses the metaphor of taking off one set of clothes and putting on a completely different set of clothes. You look different, you are different. I was thinking about this morning and thinking it's a bit like, say you were down like in the Antarctic at the moment, approaching the Antarctic winter, and the clothing you'd have there, I guess it would be really sort of high-tech, protective fabrics, really heavy, thick, warm clothing, goggles and things to keep frostbite off and all of that, wouldn't it? And then you jump on a plane and you fly into Bognor, Regis, or somewhere even more consistently warm than Bognor, Regis. You would take off those clothes. They would no longer be appropriate. In fact, they'd be really uncomfortable. You'd be absolutely stifling hot. It's completely the wrong garments, the wrong equipment for this setting. So you'd take it off and you'd put on your Hawaiian shirts and your Bermuda shorts and your shades and your hat and your sunscreen. And that would be what's appropriate for this state of being. So he's setting up these very tangible, very kind of relatable metaphors. And that, because this isn't really practical, Paul is getting really practical. This is about mindset. It's not about some esoteric thing that happens to you. This is about our choice, day by day. What would Jesus think in this circumstance? How would the Jesus mindset change my mindset in this circumstance? He says in verse 2, set your minds. Set your minds. That's the practical outcome of this. So when your minds are doing all this and we're going all around and we're thinking about all sorts of things, we take a moment and we stop and we breathe and we check ourselves and we say, I'm going to set my mind on the things that are above, not the things that are below. In verse 10, he says, you are being renewed in knowledge. I love that because it suggests that this is an ongoing process. You are being renewed. It's ongoing. It's day by day. We're not going to get this right. Probably not our whole lives are we going to get this right. But each day we try. We make it that little step. We try to just pull it back. When we realize we've sort of wandered off the path a little bit, we notice it and we come back. When we make that correction, what would Jesus think? And that's the the kind of link to last week as well. It's that sense of sometimes our minds can be playing tricks on us. We can be thinking that something looks really good or is really good, and actually our mindset is still really worldly. And the examples last week in terms of like spiritual practice and that sort of thing, or church practice, religious practice, that might be a bit more subtle. The examples this week seem to be, I think, to my mind, a lot more obvious. Maybe not. But the examples that he's giving this week about the things to avoid, the things to kind of move our minds away from, they might be more obvious perhaps, but it doesn't mean they're any easier to avoid. But we've got to kind of deal with the elephant in the room. I've been talking now for sort of 3 preaches all about the fact that, you know, the whole of the Christian faith is about rooting our faith in Christ. It's not about following a list of rules. It's not that we have, we've got these dozens and dozens of rules, 360, whatever it is, rules in the Old Testament, they say in the law, and you've got to follow them all perfectly. No, the good news of Jesus is that he has done it all. So hang on, we've just been talking about that, and I've been going into some detail about that, about how that spirit of moralism, that spirit of religion, that Pharisaic spirit, the spirit of the Pharisees, I called it, that's all about ticking the boxes and fulfilling the obligations and, you know, keeping all the rules. That is not the good news of Jesus. But hang on a second, we've now got into a section where Paul is listing all these sins, all these things to avoid. I mean, do those two things sit together? And I think they absolutely do. We've become very focused on kind of binary ideas of in or out, particularly binary ideas of salvation. Are you in? Are you out? Are you saved? Are you not? Are you going to heaven? Are you going to hell? If it's put really kind of crassly like that. We've got these very binary ideas, but the word salvation is rooted in the word for healing. Are you like our word salve? It's about healing. It's about an ongoing process. So this isn't, I think about, you know, hang on, here's more rules. Question, are you keeping all the rules? No, that's the spirit of the Pharisees. This is about mindset. This is about lifestyle. This is about practice. This is about maturing and developing and being nurtured in the ways of heaven. It's about a quality of life. It's about a quality of life. Is your life flourishing? Is your life growing? Are you growing, as Elisa was saying earlier, are you growing in those fruit of the Spirit? Do you feel more love, more joy, more peace, more patience, more kindness, more goodness, more faithfulness, more gentleness, more self-control? Have I forgotten one? 1, 2, 3, 4. No. If I've forgotten one, look it up later. Galatians 5. So are you feeling more of those things, or are you feeling less? Does your life feel more at peace? Do you feel more flourishing? Do you feel less anxiety, less hatred, less concern, less, in the wrong sense of the word, less kind of fear? Is your life flourishing? It's about a quality of life. It's about those things which are going to lead us into fullness and wholeness of life, and those things that are actually going to shortcut and stunt and defile and erode that fullness of life. It's in the same way you get the language of eternal life. Are you inheriting eternal life? Or are you gaining the kingdom of heaven? Those are the expressions that are often used, and we've often just interpreted that as meaning that means you're going to heaven. But that's a really, it's such a shallow understanding of those phrases that it's almost unhelpful. Because it's all about the quality of life. Are you inheriting eternal life now? Eternal doesn't mean just a whole lot of time. It means beyond time. It is outside of time. Are you living in a beyond time life force, a lifestyle, a life quality now? Are you inheriting that heavenly way of being, that way that is heaven and not earth now? It's a bit like plants in the garden. We've been looking at our garden a lot recently. We try and grow fruit and fruit trees and that sort of thing. And our apple tree, we've got some good trees in our garden. But our apple tree, I think I've probably mentioned it before, yet again this summer, probably not had enough rain and that sort of stuff. But the leaves are all brown and it looks a bit blighty and a bit buggy. It's a good tree. But all the time it's got that blight, all the time it's got that slight ill health, it looks like, of the leaves, it's not going to flourish. It's not going to give us the fruit that we hope for. It's still a good tree, But we hope that that blight will pass, that it will be healed. We'll go out and spray it with something probably, so that it can be as fruitful as it possibly can be. It can give the flowers, the blossom, the blooms that we hope for. And so Paul is pointing out in this section in Colossians 3, things that will stunt or deform or inhibit that life, that growth, that flourishing, that fruit. And the first list is, the whole theme of this seems to be the theme of kind of sexual sin. It seems to be all about kind of sexuality. The first word is very clearly sexual immorality, and the rest sort of follow on from that and seem, the commentators say, to be carrying on that theme. But you could take them more generally as well. Because Paul, back 2,000 years ago, he lived in a sex-saturated culture. Doesn't that sound weird? That must be really weird. I mean, I can't imagine what that's like. Can you? That was a joke, okay? Because just like us, they lived in a culture that was absolutely saturated with sexuality. And in their culture, that was very often outworked in the religious, in the explicitly religious sphere. There were temples to goddesses and gods of love where that sort of thing went on, and there were temple prostitutes. It was very much a part of the religious culture, never mind the kind of general culture. And I'd kind of argue perhaps our focus on sexuality almost is religious in its kind of obsession and outworking. Never mind in our culture how pervasive sexuality is in things like commerce and advertising and communication. Think how often sexuality is used in just general communication. But also think about questions of like sexual identity and practice dominating the discussions of things like identity and selfhood and well-being and relationships. Whenever we're talking about those things, so what's your identity? How are you flourishing in your selfhood? How are we thinking about our well-being? How are we thinking about our relationships? It seems that sexuality is almost like the dominant concern in all of those conversations. It seems, I'm not saying it's unimportant, but you can really see that cultural influence, I guess, ever since Sigmund Freud, where sexuality seemed to be at the heart of absolutely everything. I was listening to something this week, and someone gave a really good example of the word intimacy. The word intimacy now is almost a euphemism for sex, isn't it? Like, have you been intimate? Have you been? And you think, we kind of use that as a euphemism, but intimacy needs to be reclaimed as a word that's much bigger than just sexuality, because intimacy is so essential. Everyone needs to have intimacy, and that might be nothing to do with sexuality. Friendships need to be intimate. Relationships need to be intimate. And I think one of the great tragedies, one of the great epidemics of our culture, we talk about a mental health epidemic in our culture, and I think one of the underlying causes of that is we've lost connection with one another. We don't know how to connect to one another anymore. We're relating to one another through screens or through superficial relationships or something like that. And the idea of reclaiming closeness, relationship, intimacy is so important. And actually, I would argue that sexuality can sometimes shortcut intimacy. Sometimes I think in our culture, we go to sex so we don't have to be intimate. Do you know what I'm saying? Actually, sexuality can shortcut the process of intimacy, and we don't know how to do intimacy, so we just sleep together. We don't know how to do connection. We don't know how to actually nurture and guard and see these things flourishing in our relationships, so we just go straight to the sex act. And I think we are, and again, I'm going to talk about this in just a second, it's easy to overstate these things and get them wrong. However, it's so important to have a more wise understanding of all these different assets of our being. We need, especially we in the church, need to get a healthy view of sexuality. Against culture's obsession with it, and notions and practices within our culture that seem to be like obviously and patently unhealthy, the church has often responded in exactly the opposite direction. Met that, well, they're going to be wild and wacky out there, so we're going to be wild and wacky at the other end of the spectrum. We've been repressive, we've been puritanical, we've gone, as I was saying earlier, we go to moralism and moralistic ways of thinking. As I was saying a few weeks ago, we break out our Les Dawson impression. Well, and that sort of thing. Too soon for the Les Dawson? Oh. We talk about sexuality as if it's the be-all and end-all, and we've been having long conversations about this in our sort of more intimate church gatherings and meetings and that sort of thing to work out our pastoral response, because we talk about sex as if it's the be-all and end-all of every conversation. And you know what? God might be doing something else. Something else might be going on. You're probably getting sick of me talking about it now, but it's because the fact that we don't never talk about it, so I'm talking about it now. So button up, settle in. When I was reading the verse earlier, when you were hearing me speaking about it, which of the sins leapt out to you more? Was it sexual immorality, or was it malice? Was it slander? Against the obsession of our culture, we get over-focused on sexual issues. Or we do the opposite mistake, we don't talk about it at all. It's like, don't talk about it. That's uncomfortable. And obviously it's a massive subject, and I'm not going to answer every question this morning, but my quick answer to this is we need balance and we need wisdom. We need to always see sexual issues as part of the bigger picture, not the be-all and end-all. And we also need to ask what's going on underneath those issues. What else is happening? What's the thing behind the thing? What's the underlying problem? Really telling phrase for me here is greed, which is idolatry. Greed, which is idolatry. And as the commentators say, the context, he's probably talking about like a sexual greed, a veracity, but you could talk about greed genuinely, greed for anything. And the thing with greed, really great definition here from Alan Thompson in the IVP commentary, greed is an all-consuming desire for something one does not have, but wrongly believes will grant satisfaction apart from God. As such, it is the epitome of idolatry. It's that burning desire, it's that yearning hunger for the things that we feel, we hope, will fill the emptiness. The things that we hope will fill the emptiness, but only God can fill the emptiness. So they are idols. It's something we're using to fill the emptiness, the space, the need, the wound that only God can. So when we're confronted with sexual sin, we can be tempted to go in two different directions with our questions. Is it helpful to ask the questions, is this person just degenerate, nasty, perverted? Am I just degenerate, nasty, perverted? Is it just a question of willpower? I just need to try harder. Is that the best set of questions? Or is a better set of questions, what is the emptiness that you are trying to fill? What is the emptiness that I'm trying to fill? What is the wound? What is the hurt? What is the pain that you are trying to medicate with this rather than with something that might actually bring you wholeness and peace and life? Those are better questions that get us beyond the kind of Les Dawson, tongue-clucking moralism and to real flourishing, real health, real life. I just want to take a little side note there, because it talks about, because of these things, the wrath of God is coming. And again, if you've grown up, if you've absorbed a certain view of God as basically a horrible headmaster, an abusive father, something like that, you can read this almost like as, because you're doing this, you just wait till your father comes home. And there's that horrible, violent vision of God, which many of us have absorbed from different sources. That idea, God is going to come with a big stick and punish all of you. You just wait till your dad gets home. You just wait till it was that teacher at school that had no control over the classroom, and at some point, usually in floods of tears, they would go off to get the the headmaster or sometimes the deputy head. Often it was the deputy head. They were very good at this stuff. And then everyone went, Mr. So-and-so's coming. Everyone behaves themselves, you know. And I mean, you can take those images for what you like. I really find those images massively unhelpful. I think it gives us a distorted view of God. And I think it's not the God that we see revealed in Jesus Christ, who is our ultimate window to understand who God is. And I never look at Jesus and see an angry father, an abusive father. I never look at Jesus and see an angry headmaster or a scary, teacher. I don't see that. So how do we understand that? And there's a really helpful thing that I found really helpful, an Anabaptist viewing of this concept of wrath, or wrath, depending on how you say it. And God's wrath in some Anabaptist schools of thought is that God's wrath is what happens when God takes his hand of protection away. It's not God's out of control, rage, anger, I'm going to hit something. God is protecting us. We don't know how much God is protecting us all the time. But if we keep saying, no, let me pass, no thanks, don't want that, I want to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to act like this, I'm going to have this behavior, at some point God says, I can't protect you anymore. You're going to have to let the consequences of this work out in your life. And we'll see what happens. And then I will be with you to pick up the pieces because I'm a loving father. Then like the prodigal son, Father, I want the money. I want to go and live the wild life. I want to run away to a distant land and live it up and party all day and party all night. And the father just has to say, okay. Wisdom in this case is only going to come with experience. It breaks God's heart, I'm sure. But he says, you're going to have to get some wounds and some hurts and some pain. And unfortunately, only then are you going to realize. But then I will be with you. And then I will be welcoming you home. And I will be putting my cloak around you and the ring on the finger. And, we'll be having a party. I'll be so glad when you come home. But unfortunately, I'm going to have to lift my hand up. I'm going to have to let you make these terrible mistakes. And I think that's a more helpful understanding of what God's wrath is. Moving on, the second set of things that Paul draws attention to are more relational, interpersonal issues and sins and problems. He talks about anger and wrath and malice and slander, that's saying bad things about other people, and abusive things or filthy language that can be translated. He also says, do not lie. Lies create such problems. Lies can be so destructive. When we think about another person, again, back to your mindset, when we think and when we speak about another person, especially a fellow believer, especially a fellow disciple, because if we can't get it right amongst ourselves, what have we got to offer the world in terms of good news? We have got to recognize these are just not okay. It's not okay to be sitting in the place of these things. They are not to be persisted with. They are not to be justified. Yeah, but you don't know what she did. You don't know what he did. You don't know what they said. I'm angry and I've got a right to be angry. Very satisfying to feel self-righteous, isn't it? And we're all going to do it. Let's be honest, we're all going to do it. We're going to say things that perhaps later on we don't feel good about. The point here is not, have we ticked the box? Have we never, ever done any of these things? No, that's moralism. That's the Pharisees. We're not that. The point is, we don't think this is okay. We don't justify it. We don't stay in that place. When you're aware, when you're thinking in that mindset realm, you think, I know that I've been dragged down to the things of the earth here. I know that I'm dwelling in this place of this kind of stuff, and I don't want to be here anymore. I'm going to let my mind go up to that higher place. I'm going to forgive that person. I'm not going to dwell on the things that would make me wrathful or angry. I'm not going to, not that they're not serious, not that they're not real, but I'm just not going to live out of that place. I'm not going to justify it. I'm not going to say it's okay. That's the old life. You died to all of that with Christ, didn't you? Didn't you? It starts with the word if. And that's the challenge to our life. In fact, if you died with Christ, then you died to all of that. It doesn't belong. It's like the Antarctic clothing on the beach of Bognor in the middle of June. It doesn't belong. It's not fitting. You've taken off those old garments. And the old mindset was all about division. We come to this brilliant thing. There is no longer Greek and Jew, circumcised, uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, enslaved and free, but Christ is all and in all. By the way, Scythians were like the uber barbarians. You had barbarians, you had everyone that wasn't a Greek, all the kind of wild, wacky Conan types, and then you had the Scythians. They were like Premier League barbarians. They were the barbarians that the other barbarians said, hey guys, you ought to calm down a bit, dial it back a bit, lads, getting a bit mad there, And so Paul is saying, the people who you would put most outside the pale, the people you would absolutely think are disqualified. No, as we said last week, no one is disqualified. There isn't all these easy, lazy categories of in and out and good and bad and righteous and unrighteous and elect and reprobate and whatever you want to talk about. Those lazy, easy categories. No. You don't know what God is doing in that person's life. So just pray for them, walk with them, love them, and we will see what the Lord can do. As I said a few weeks ago, I wonder what God is doing in that person's life, rather than just posting them into some easy, lazy category. We're all God's children. I want to just park with this sort of final thought. He said at the beginning, for you've died with Christ, and your life is hidden. You've died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, is revealed, then you also will be revealed with him in glory. And yeah, there's something here about our ultimate hope of being with Christ, united with the Godhead. But I think there's also something here about an ongoing sense, an everyday truth, the mindset, the reality that we choose to live in. What would Jesus think? Where are you investing? Where are you putting your life and your thoughts? Is it with Christ or is it not with Christ? It's a bit like moving house, I think. And I'll just ask the band to come up and start getting plugged in, and we'll see where we go from here. But I think it's a bit like moving house. When you have to turn out your house, turn out your attic, and you've got to make that decision. What am I going to throw away, and what am I going to put into the removal van? What's going to be part of our new life in our new home? Have you all had this experience? And you get a skip outside your house, you fill up the rubbish bins. It's making that decision day by day. What is going to be part of our new life in our new home, and what is not going to be there? It's about making that decision. It's not about moralism. We're not going to get this perfect. It's not about never getting it wrong, never stumbling, never falling flat on our faces even. It's not about that. We're going to do all of these things. We're going to stray into all of the faults and the sins and the problems that have been identified. We're going to do all of it. I'm going to do all of it. You're going to do all of it. But it's about never justifying it. It's never saying it's okay, and deciding instead that day by day we choose to be with Christ. We choose to experience, as Stuart was saying a few weeks ago, to live, to make that resurrection experience part of our lives as a day-by-day experience. We take off the old clothes and we put on the new ones.